for everything we just talked about, which is, as a supervisor, you now are the company. Even if you don't have employees, if you're in a position of authority or power, you are now a risk manager of the company. So I just want to give you some more information to protect yourself and to protect the company. We talked a lot about this today, the protected characteristics. So race, color, religion, sex, national origin, age, disability, or genetic information. And what you really need to know is don't ever include these characteristics in any decision that you make. If you do that, you will never be in trouble. So when hiring somebody, when transferring somebody, when promoting them, when terminating them, when writing them up, when counseling them, if you never take these into consideration, you will never be accused of discrimination or harassment. It's easy as that. And so just stay away from these, but know that these are the protected characteristics for federal and Florida law as of today. We'll see if anything changes moving forward. So how do you do that? You just always stick to, like for hiring, their experience, their skills, their interview questions and answers, their educational requirements. If you just always stick to the facts and never take this stuff into consideration, you won't get in trouble with hiring and then with termination as well. How do you, not get accused of harassment or discrimination, say, for making a decision on termination? Document. The word that HR loves and everybody else hates, document, document, document. But the documentation will keep you out of hot water, not just the company. Because if an employee, we talked a lot about perception and reality, and your perception is not going to be their reality. So if they perceive that you're picking on them for whatever reason, then that's their reality, and now they're dead set on that. But if you have documented their poor performance, their bad behavior, if you've given them deadlines to meet things or to improve their skills and they have not done that, and it's all documented, and then they come back and file for claims of harassment or discrimination, you can pull out the documentation that says, no, that's not the reason I terminated, or that's not the reason I put you on a performance improvement plan. Here's the reason, and we've discussed this, and it's been documented together. So towards the end of this, Nicole's going to talk a little bit about how she can help you with the documentation if you're not feeling comfortable with that. What I typically would suggest is, I'm the person, I don't care if you write it on a napkin, just write down that a conversation has happened with an employee about their poor performance or maybe their poor behavior. And you can do that as quick as, sending them an email. You met them, I call it a hallway conversation. It really shouldn't be in the hallway because I want to be very, respectful to them. But you're talking to them, you coach them into improving their performance, you've given them a deadline. Then you can go back, you can even do it on your phone, send them an email, hey, I want to just, jot down what we just talked about, ABC, it's due by this time, let me know if you need anything. So then your expectations are crystal clear. They can't say, well, I didn't know that you expected that of me because I misinterpreted what we talked about. Well, I just wrote it down, and now we're both on the same page. And so that is why documentation, while it is a pain, is so, so, so important to document things that are happening. And it doesn't have to be something, the more serious the matter it is, it does need to be something serious, but it could just be an email. Then you've just changed your verbal conversation into a documented conversation. They'll think it's serious now, and you'll be able to, 4 months down the road, pull up the email and say, okay, I have a chain of events. So why does that matter? Retaliation, that's why. So what often happens, people will file a claim of discrimination or harassment if one of two things are happening. It's the truth, or I should say 3 things. It's the truth, they perceive it to be the truth, or they need money. So it's going to be one of those 3 things. It's actually happening, they perceive it to be happening, which in their mind is the same as it's actually happening, or they need money. Why would they need money? You just terminated them and they can't find another job. So now they come back and file claims of retaliation. So they may say, well, I complained that somebody, was harassing me and you fired me. Well, if there's no documentation that they complained, it's better for the employer. Or they can say, you're retaliating against me because I just went out on FMLA leave. Or you're retaliating against me because I have a disability and I filed for an accommodation. But if you have all the documentation that says, no, we've already had this discussion 3 times in the past 2 weeks about you coming in late or not showing up or not completing your projects. Again, even if it's an email, at least you have documentation. Does that make sense? So I know documentation is annoying and everybody hates it. We hate it too, trust me. HR doesn't love it either. But we know it's going to, be crystal clear with communication. It's not just about keeping us out of court. It's about our employees doing what we expect of them because we told them. Because guess what? Osmosis doesn't work and they can't read our mind. So crystal clear communication is very important, especially when we're talking about harassment and adverse action, which means a negative action in their employment. Now, what if they filed a harassment claim or a retaliation claim and it was false? We did an investigation and we proved that this actually did not happen. You still cannot take an adverse action against them if a reasonable person would have perceived that it was discrimination. So there we go with the reasonable person again. What's a reasonable person? Your guess is as good as mine. It's really up to the court to decide a reasonable person. But if a reasonable person says, I would have perceived that as discrimination and therefore I would have filed a complaint as well, then you cannot legally then say, hey, we proved you wrong and now you're fired. That's not the way it works. If it was a malicious intent, that's when you would be getting the lawyers involved. They'd probably be involved at that point anyways, but a lawyer would have to make that decision. So employment decisions from hiring to firing. You may be involved in these. Who's involved in hiring, who's involved in firing, why did you do the hiring, why did you do the firing, what information did you use? We already know, do not use the protected characteristics information. Who should know why decisions were made? Should your employees know, like the rest of the employees that are left after you terminate somebody, should they know the details of why you terminated somebody? And the answer is probably no, right? But here's the thing, if you've terminated them because of poor performance, their colleagues probably already know that because they've been feeling the pain. What their colleagues also will know is if you didn't do anything about it quick enough. So if you let it go for years and didn't hold them accountable, they're going to know that too. So we want to make sure, as painful it is of holding people accountable and having difficult conversations, in order for your team to trust you, you have to hold people accountable. And that way it doesn't kind of go in a vicious cycle. But I would, and I'm sure you agree with me, Nicole, I would never tell people why we made decisions on termination or something negative. Odds are they're going to know anyways, but I usually say something along the lines of, it was a business decision and we're not at liberty to discuss this and move on. Most people are going to respect that because you're providing the person who left with dignity and respect and not, fueling the fire of gossip and rumors and just saying, you know what, it's not at liberty, I'm not at liberty to discuss this. They're also going to see you as a professional who's fair and consistent. So it's very important to not discuss those things. You have any questions there? All right. Oop, I'm not going backwards, we're going forward. So this is in the supervisor's guide, which if Jessica didn't already send it, she's going to send it to you. It's kind of the same as the employee one that went out, but it has a little bit more information about retaliation. Supervisors may be held legally and personally responsible for harassment and discrimination. Everything's different. It's all based on courts, but you are now part of the company as a risk manager, and you can get personally sued, but anybody can get personally sued for anything. It doesn't mean they're going to win. So I don't want you to think becoming a supervisor is a extremely negative thing, but it definitely ups the ante of, okay, if I should have known something or if I heard something, can I ignore it? And the answer is absolutely not. We would hope no employee would ignore something if they hear it, but supervisors definitely can't unring a bell if somebody comes to you and says, hey, I'm being sexually harassed or I'm being discriminated against, but I don't want to talk about it. You can't unring that bell. You have to move forward when we're having those conversations. The other item that we talked about in the training a little bit is if an employee does not need to make money from a claim, they may just want it to stop the harassment or the sexual harassment. So the example we talked about was the news anchor that just got removed from his millions and millions and millions of dollar job, and the person who filed the claim against him didn't want money. So it's not always about money for employees who are filing claims. They just want to do their job and not be harassed. But there usually is some kind of money involved in many cases. So this is in the guide that you will be getting an email. It's a supervisor's guide. I overheard an inappropriate conversation. What do I do as a supervisor? You have to say something. You have to say something immediately. Either if it's a group of people gossiping or telling jokes, you have to, stop. Hey guys, this is not an appropriate conversation, and I need it to stop. And they might feel uncomfortable. They may snicker, and you may feel uncomfortable. It's never a comfortable conversation, especially if that's not your personality. But usually, if you say it enough, people will be like, okay, don't do that around that person. Well, if all the supervisors do it, then they're going to say, okay, we can't do this at all. We can't have these conversations at all because all the supervisors are on the same page and are saying this is inappropriate. So we all have to be on the same team. If you're hearing, an individual say something, you may want to pull them aside in like a conference room or in your office and say, I overheard you telling that joke or something, asking that person out again, and I need you to stop. If it's not your employee, it's somebody else's, another supervisor's employee, I would encourage you to talk to that other supervisor first and maybe go in together and have a conversation because now you're a witness where you can say to the other supervisor, well, it's your employee, I've heard this, are you going to talk to them or am I going to talk to them? But one of us needs to talk to them or we can go do it together. And that way you don't get the he said, she said. That's not what I said at all. Well, she's standing right here. She can tell you what she heard. But it is serious, and all the supervisors need to be on the same page when it comes to harassment and discrimination that says we will back each other up. And then if everybody does that and they have no supervisor to run to allow that behavior, then the behavior is gone. So that comes down to even, teasing somebody about their age or, maybe their clothing, their weight loss, whatever it might be. Something that's not illegal but still is inappropriate and not professional in the workplace. Again, document it, no matter how minor, and investigate and document if not minor. So if you want to talk a little bit about documentation.
Just being that this is what HR does. So if you're in a position where you don't know how to document something, you don't know the right words or how to phrase it, come to any one of us, me, to Jessica. We can all help to create the right kind of documentation, the right kind of verbiage to be able to get the right information that makes sense to keep on record. And to Wendy's point, like minor documentation, even just a casual follow-up email to a casual conversation. If you don't want to have to track it, you don't want to have to pay attention to it, drop it over to HR, just forward it to one of us, and we can kind of keep it in the file. There are times when we sometimes get those inappropriate but not illegal situations where people will come into HR. We'll record, there will be times when we will take a record of a conversation or a record of an incident and do nothing with it. But it's going to be those times when it is that inappropriate but not illegal. And it's often because the employee's like, I'm still trying to work through it, or I'm still trying to make progress with the supervisor, but I just want you to know this is where I'm at, or this is the thing that happened, or this is what I'm working on with this employee. So those types of documentation, it always helps because if you fast forward to 6 months later, when now the employee's performance has declined and potential retaliation or discrimination claims have now escalated, if we've got all that documentation to go back to, it helps us to be able to build that timeline to show how things evolved and how things progressed and exactly what we did in response. And even to record, the employee, at this point was like, no, I'm good with it and I'm handling it on my own. But it's important to have any of that documentation. If you're not comfortable doing it, that's what we're here for. We can help just to get the basics and the things that are absolutely critical on paper and on the cloud.
Thank you. Okay, another thing that's in the guide is this question, my employee mentioned concerns of harassment. What do I do as a supervisor? You have to take it seriously, even if they don't want an official report. So, if it could be something that's inappropriate but not illegal, you could maybe handle that in a different way and coach them. You're going to have to make that judgment call, but if it's illegal, there is no judgment call. You have to go forward with investigating it, calling HR and saying, okay, we have a situation here, and supporting the whole investigation. So it's your duty as now a risk manager of the company, because you're a supervisor, to get the facts and take every allegation seriously and not just blow it out. Even if you think it's ridiculous and you think, well, I wouldn't be offended by this, remember, you are a different person than somebody else. And so we never want to naysay somebody because they have a different perception or sensitivity level, because you don't know, maybe you're the unreasonable person. You never know what people are thinking or feeling. And you may also not know all the other facts that are going on in their life. They might be having an APA issue, a disability issue, or family medical leave issue, and you're not aware of it. And so HR would know that. Write down as much facts as possible. Somebody comes in your office and they're upset or they're crying. Try your best to, first of all, close the door if you have one, or go into a location where there is a door, and then, write down the facts. Don't touch them, don't hug them, don't pat them on the back. That may just exacerbate the issue. Never agree with them, never disagree with them. Being empathetic is not being sympathetic. So being empathetic is just putting yourself in their shoes for that moment. It doesn't mean you agree with them, but never agree with them and say, oh yes, that other person always does this, because now you're a risk manager of the organization that have just thrown your own organization under the bus. Even if you do feel that way, that's not up to you to be the judge and jury at that point. Does that make sense? Yeah. For supervisors, again, you need to lead by example. So everything that we talked about in the employee training, you need to be the leader. And if you have been here for a while, you're probably friends with people, and maybe you weren't a manager before or a supervisor, and now you've got to go into the awkward territory of saying, well, I'm a supervisor or manager now, so I can't be, hanging out with you after work, having beers, talking about the company. I can hang out with you, but we can't be talking about, bad things about the company, or we can't be doing things that are inappropriate, where before, not that it was even appropriate before, but it might have been a little bit okay. As supervisors first become supervisors and move up the management path, they often lose some friends that are in the organization, because those friends may not appreciate your new level of professionalism and, where you draw the line. And it is what it is. It's the path we choose as becoming management. But it doesn't mean you have to be a bad person to be a manager. It just means you need to be fair and consistent. And being fair and consistent means being fair and consistent to everybody and not just your friends. So, I just wanted to kind of get you guys in the room without the employees. So, if you had any questions that you could ask here, but really let you know that you're a risk manager of the firm now. And there's some responsibilities that you possibly didn't have before that you have now. And how you act and how you lead is how other people are going to act. And if we can all act the same way, we can get all the employees to act the same way. Doesn't mean we can't have fun. We can have fun, we just can't do it at anyone's expense. Anybody have any questions? Nope? All right. You are all approved as managers and supervisors who are fully trained in inclusivity. Thank you for your time today. It wasn't too painful at all, right? It is serious stuff, though.
Oh, did you guys sign the